the minute that you think that the process of bringing an electronic patient record into your organisation, the minute you see it more as a transaction rather than a cultural piece, would be the first learning point I would put across to you. It is most definitely about culture change, and there's that old saying about culture eats strategy for breakfast, and you will certainly find that out if you choose to treat your relationship with the electronic patient record as just a transaction. It's true that we went live with our Cerner Millennium electronic patient record in 2017, but the real story for us actually started a couple of years before, around 2015, where we decided that in order to really make a step change in what our patients, friends and relatives were experiencing, and what the professionals, whether they're clinical or non-clinical, were experiencing in terms of providing that care or supporting the provision of care, we really felt that in order to make a kind of a step change in that journey, we needed to do it so in a way where very much digital was underpinning and enabling where we wanted to get to. We also, and I think this is one of the things that was a real positive from the get-go really, is that when we set into the procurement process for the electronic patient record, we were really clear from the outset that if we could have collaborators or partner trusts or organisations in with us from the start or at another point in time, that's the way that we kind of set up the procurement process. And thankfully, our near neighbours, Bradford Teaching Hospital Trust, because they were coming to a point where some of their legacy systems were probably reaching their sell-by date, asked to be involved quite early on in the procurement process. We agreed, came up with joint arrangements between ourselves. And I have to say, this is against a backdrop of two trusts who I would have said historically have had their challenging moments with one another, but we came together. So we kind of entered into this procurement process, and then subsequently the electronic patient record implementation together. The thing I think I would want to kind of get people to really understand, and certainly anybody who represents a board member or has a board role, and I get this because I've spoken to a number of chief executives who, for example, have contacted me in and around some of the work that we've done. And the first thing that I've always tried to impress, certainly on chief executive colleagues, is that this is probably the one kind of event or action that you will lead on in your organisation that needs your specific attention. Anybody who is of a mindset that this is something that they can delegate, certainly at board level, to other people and do so in a way that they can then have a passing interest, I think that is probably the fastest way for you to write your resignation letter. So I would really want to encourage you as much as possible to see this as one of the top 2 or 3 items in your in tray. The other point I would make as well is the language of implementation has been used. And I think what I would characterise is actually a journey of 4 stages. And if you say that we started in 2015, we went live in 2017, I think I would characterise that as the implementation phase. And then post 2017, probably around about to around about 2019, I would describe that we kind of moved from an implementation phase to a stabilisation section or next phase. And it's really important, I think, for people to understand there's one thing preparing, training, culture, trying to get people into the mindset that this is quite a significant change in the way that they will be asked to work in the future. But actually the go live, even though myself, I haven't got much hair, but what hair I had probably went grey. Mandy can speak for herself a little bit later. And even though that was really, really difficult and working cross-organisationally was really challenging as well, But nonetheless, I look back and I reflect now and say, to some respects, that was kind of the more straightforward phase, although that's not how it felt at the time. The stabilisation phase is really, really challenging, because one of the things you realise, and whether you've got an Epic system or scripts, or whether it's a Cerner system or others that are out there, they do follow this similar path, in that they're constructed in a way where you kind of get 80% of what they give you, and there's not much choice around how or what you do with that 80%. And then there's a 20% kind of flexibility that you can do the tailoring of. The one challenge with all of that, and if you look at our combined workforce across CHFT and Bradford, which was around 12,000 colleagues, is trying to get to a situation where people will use the system as intended and consistently. And of course, you've got those people who are enthusiasts and really want to try everything. And then you've got some people who actually, not only do they want to still work with the paper systems that they've got, but if they could use an abacus too, they would. And the real journey around some of this is, and particularly in this stabilisation phase, is really getting people practicing using the system in a way that then not only provides and enables the patient care to be given in the way you would want it to, but also kind of gives you the opportunity for what I would describe as the third phase, which is around optimization. I would say at this moment in time, we're kind of through implementation, we're through stabilization, and we are now in between what I would call stabilization and optimization. We haven't reached the fourth bit yet, which I would describe as transformation. But nonetheless, I would say, in comparison to many trusts out there, we're pretty much down the line, and we've had a lot of our stuff independently assessed to know that it's the real deal in terms of how we've moved forwards. A couple of points I would say is that you should not underestimate in any way, shape or form the need to make sure that you have a really good client-side management team that can manage the relationship with the provider, whoever that provider is. It's also, I think, really, really important that through the process, particularly of implementation, that you have some form of external gateway review to make sure that you are working in a way that addresses what you've said your intent is, and that you are meeting your milestones and plans. And certainly one of the things that we found very, very useful with Bradford, and we still operate to this day, is a jointly run transformation board that is run across both organisations with myself, and it was Clive Kay originally, and it's now Mel Pickup, who's the Chief Exec of Bradford Teaching Hospitals. And we kind of run that every 2 or 3 months, and we're talking about where next, and we're also trying to make sure that the issues that we still need to face are being addressed, and in particular making sure that the fiscals are where we would want them to be. So that's kind of an initial story I'd like to give for now, and then I'll probably just pass over either back to you, Saffron, or on to Mandy.
Thanks so much, Owen. That was really fantastic, spot on time. Thank you so much. And I think, you know, your emphasis on that cultural change piece and the importance of the governance points in there, as well as what you actually do on the implementation, I think is absolutely critical. So some really helpful lessons there. I'm going to go straight to Mandy now, and then we'll go into the Q&A. Over to you, Mandy. Thank you.
Thanks, Saffron. Hello, everybody. So I think I'd like to step back a bit further than Owen did and talk about the years before we actually procured the EPR, because I think one of the messages I wanted to give is it isn't just a 3-year journey, as Owen's alluded to, or really even just a 5-year journey. If I think back to some of the critical success factors of what we did in CHFT, then it takes me back to 2012, where with board buy-in, which is absolutely critical, we were able to invest in our infrastructure. And what that meant was, as we moved forward, as we bought new clinical systems, we were actually putting them on top of a good foundation. And if anybody in the audience is thinking about not doing that, I would sort of relook at your plans. So my journey really started in 2012. And then it got exciting because obviously the board gave support for EPR, and the procurement process was a good year. Before then, we signed contracts in 2015. So a real lesson for me about making sure that we've got all the foundations in place. I think the other thing is really understanding where your digital maturity is at that time too. And some of the things, when I reflect and look back about why our journey was successful, and I see it as a success, was because we started to introduce technology before EPR. We introduced vital signs ops. We introduced an electronic document management system, and these kinds of solutions actually put technology out there that people got used to using it. They started to build their confidence and trust digital. We also did a full-blown maternity EPR and a theatre system. So we then started the journey on EPR, and again, one of the big lessons that I learned, this is not about the technology. And I don't have a major long-standing technical background, and I sort of think I was lucky, because this is about the people, and there's a big engagement piece around what you're trying to do with the technology. And I know Owen's already talked about stabilisation, optimisation and transformation, and that's really, really important, because you need to engage all your workforce in taking that journey. I know when I spoke to Saffron a few days ago, she talked about surprises. There were quite a few surprises on the way. I think the biggest surprise for me was how little information comes your way when it comes to deploying such a big project. We were unique in the fact that we were joined with Bradford, but also we were unique because we decided to cover inpatients, outpatients and our emergency departments. We were banded as the biggest deployment in Europe, not just the UK. So whilst we could go and see what other people were doing, we probably couldn't learn from many people in and around us. And I suppose my expectation was, well, that's okay, because I'll probably get that information from the supplier. Well, that doesn't come easily either. So again, a little bit of advice: don't think that your partner supplier actually knows everything, and they not only knows everything, they will transfer that information to you even if you don't ask. That does not happen easily. And one of the lessons I would learn and probably do differently, I'd spend much more time thinking about where we're going from and where our journey is taking us to. So we did get to the eventual deployment. It was an interesting weekend, and I know Owen's already talked about having that gateway assurance, and that was really important for us, because the very last gateway review that we had done for the trust was a review that actually indicated whether we were ready to go live or not. You know, what were we? Had we got everything in place ready to go live? And we were. The second gateway review talked about progress, and at that point in time, both trusts decided they were going to actually deploy together over the same weekend all at once. But that gateway review actually made us rethink about how we wanted to implement the EPR, and we took the decision based on that to actually stagger the implementation. So CHFT went first, and then Bradford went second. And I keep saying this, whilst our deployment was a success, we did really, really well, Bradford probably had a better go live, and that's because we were able to transfer all the learning from the deployment of the EPR in Calderdale to Bradford, and again they had a successful deployment. The next thing is that it felt really good when we got EPR over the line, and it almost tied up our current 5-year strategy. And it would be so easy then to start putting a pen to paper and say, so what does our next 5 years look like? And we didn't do that, because we actually spent some time thinking about, so what's really happened? Are we stable? No, we weren't. We had to do a lot of work to go through that stabilisation phase, as Owen already alludes to. And it took us a while to get through that. We had to relook at benefits realisation, because the benefits realisation piece didn't actually reflect what we had in our business case, but we worked through it. And it's only now that in July 2020 that we've actually now signed off our new 5-year digital strategy. I think my biggest learning of all of this is I had a seat at the board. So from the day I took this job on, I was present in all board meetings at the HFT, and EPR was on every single agenda that where we had our meetings. It was on our weekly exec boards, and it was on our monthly board of directors. And I felt supported because I had a group of execs around me who were actually wedded to this, just like I was. It was a clinically led project, but it had lots of executive support underneath it. And I felt supported, and I felt in a safe space. And I think if I was going to reflect, that's what made the project a success.
Thank you. And thank you so much, both of you, for both your contributions in the presentations and then answering the questions. You've been so strategic, incredibly clear, but also enough detail so that people can really get a handle on what you're saying, and particularly around the lessons learned. And thank you also for your honesty in the mistakes you've made on your way, and how you've overcome that. I think I always have in mind that notion of how we speed up the learning for others when you're kind of at the vanguard. And I think your generosity in that is really welcome. Thank you very much.